Okay, so let me show you that those rules from where we have been computing these perquisites. Accommodation, car, and all remaining perquisites which we will compute. So you must have an idea that from where we are studying. So again, that is available from the website incometaxindia.gov.in, and you can see these rules, income tax rules. These are rules. This is rule 3. Okay, this is valuation of perquisites. So here you can see this is how we compute the value. This was the calculation of accommodation. This table when unfurnished, furnished, hotel accommodation, 15% salary, 10%, 7.5%. Okay, in future you have to refer from these sources, not from any secondary source. At high level you have to refer the original sources for everything, not only for income tax act, even for your day-to-day life discussions or rules, etc. You have to refer the original things. This was car. The value of perquisite by way of motor car to an employee by the employer shall be determined in accordance with the following table, namely, so value of perquisite per calendar month. Okay, cubic capacity does not exceed 1.6 or exceeds 1.6. So I simplified that table for you. That's it. I simply I did what? This table, which is written in the rules, might look complicated to you. So I simplified this table for you. Otherwise, everything what I taught you is from this table. The way or the when you read directly from the act or rules, it might become little bit difficult, because you don't have the practice of reading from the original act or rules. The moment you start reading it, after some time you will find it very, very easy. In fact, you can say this will be the simplest document for you to read, but you need practice then. Okay, so I simply wanted to show you this rule number 3, from where we learn how to compute the value of perquisites. So now let me come back and let us start the new concept, or you can say third valuation, and that is of domestic servants. So let us start learning about remaining perquisites. So this is third perquisite. Already I have covered accommodation with you, car with you, and now third is perquisite of domestic servant. Now, what do I mean by domestic servant? Can you tell me what are these domestic servants? Maybe sweeper, for example, gardener, maid, watchman. There may be many domestic servants. When these people are provided to me for household work, it becomes a saving to me. Because now the salary of these people is given by the employer directly to these people. Had I employed these domestic servants, I would have to pay the salary. So it becomes a perquisite to me. I'm getting personal benefit. These people are working at my house, so I'm getting personal benefit. But expenditure I'm not incurring. Expenditure is being incurred by the employer, so it becomes a benefit. Benefit means perquisite. So logically, what should be taxable? Can you tell me logically what should be the taxable value in my hands? Simple logic. What is
Entire
the
value
tax?
minus the amount recovered.
What value?
The entire value, the remuneration paid to domestic servants minus the amount recovered
By
from
whom? By whom?
by the employer.
Yes. So I can simply say that actual expenditure of the employer on paying the salaries for this purpose minus amount recovered from the employee. That's it. This is the simple answer. So let us discuss with me. Let us discuss with you some examples. Obviously, from my book, I will discuss those. So let us discuss some examples, and you have to tell me the values directly. So let me discuss illustration 1, and you have to tell me the answer. Just listen, and I will note only relevant points. X has been provided a watchman at his house. X has been provided a watchman at his house by the employer. So who has provided? By the employer. I am writing the word R only. R means employer. From which date? From 16th August 2020. The salary of watchman rupees 10,000 per month is paid by the employer to the watchman. So the salary of watchman was 10,000 per month. It is paid by whom? Employer to the watchman. However, employee pays only rupees 1,500 per month to the employer for this service. For getting this service, the employee is giving only 1,500 per month to the employer. Can you tell me in this case the value which is taxable in my hands as an employee? Any answer? Anyone who can give me the answer?
So 63,750.
60?
63,750.
Yeah, 63,750 is the correct answer. Now month doesn't mean complete month in every way, in every perquisite case. It was complete only in case of car, and that too was calendar month. So don't apply that concept for every perquisite. Every perquisite has its own rules. Logically, if I was provided the facility from 16th August, the value calculation will start from 16th August. So 10,000 was the expenditure incurred by employer. 1,500 I am paying, and this is the net saving for 7.5 months. That's it. This will give you 63,500. If you got the point, please raise your hand. This is the value which I should show while computing income under the head salaries. Those who got the answer, please raise your hands. Next illustration. Or illustration 3, not 2, illustration 3. Let me discuss illustration 3 first. X has been provided an unfurnished accommodation. X has been provided an unfurnished accommodation, which is also taken on lease by the employer. But this accommodation is not owned by the employer. This is taken on lease by the employer. On a monthly rent of 20,000. So the rent was rupees 20,000 per month, lease rent. The taxable value of this perquisite comes out to be 89,000. Now directly the answer has been given. Answer has been given of which perquisite? Value of perquisite of accommodation. Value of perquisite. Accommodation. Directly the answer has been given to me, 89,000. Had this 89,000 not been given to me, I would have computed it by applying the concept 15% of salary or rent paid by the employer, whichever is less. For this, there was a need to give salary also. So the question directly says that accommodation value is 89,000, which they have computed themselves. He has been provided a gardener. Now that is a different thing. He has been provided a gardener also, whose salary rupees 1,20,000 during the previous year is paid by the employer. Now I want to ask, what is the value of perquisite of domestic servant? Can anyone tell me that what is the value of perquisite of domestic servant which is taxable in my hands? Any answer? What is the perquisite of value of perquisite of domestic servant taxable in my hands?
Assuming nothing has been recovered, 1,20,000.
Your voice is not coming properly.
1,20,000.
Yes, that's it. I got a domestic servant gardener for which the salary of whose salary 120 was given by the employer directly. So that is my benefit. So 120 is taxable in my hands. Please raise your hands if you got the answer 1 lakh. Next illustration. So illustration 2 now. X has been provided an unfurnished accommodation owned by the employer. So now this is the change. In earlier case it was lease and now it is owned by the employer. Whose taxable value comes out to be 89. So value of perquisite of accommodation is 89. He has been provided a gardener also. Same language. He has been provided a gardener also, whose salary rupees 1,20,000 during the previous year is paid by the employer can you tell me in this case value of perquisite or domestic servant, which will be taxable in my hands? When I will compute my income, I will include this value. So can you tell me what is this value?
Sir, is it nil?
Nil. This is what you are saying?
Yes, sir, 0.
Okay, so any other answer?
It is paid by the employer, so it shall be 1,20,000 only.
120 is another answer. Any other answer? How many of you says that the answer is nil? Raise your hand. How many of you think that answer is nil? Okay. How many of you think that answer is 1,20,000? How many of you think that answer is 1,20,000? Answer is nil. Answer is not 1,20,000. Answer is nil. Now, those who know answer is nil, please give the reason to everyone.
So when you teach perquisites, you say the basic thing you should see is how much you're saving. How much you're saving is the value, right? In case the accommodation is owned by the employer and they're employing a gardener, then they're just maintaining their own property. I'm not getting anything out of it per se. Employer is just doing it for themselves, so that's why nil.
Yeah, so it is the correct reason. Because in the earlier case, accommodation was taken on rent by the employer, lease by the employer. In that case, maintaining the garden was not the responsibility of the employer. But now if I being an employer, if I have my own accommodation, whether my employee lives in that house or not, if I want to maintain the garden, I have to maintain the gardener. So coincidentally only, as an employee, when I start living in that house, I got this facility of gardener. It is not my personal benefit because employer wants to maintain this garden. The same issue was raised, and in 1973, CBDT issued a circular on this. With this reason, they have exempted this perquisite. Now let me show you that circular also, so that you know that how circulars are written. Now let me share with you the website of tax department. So now let us, I hope you can see the website, tax laws and rules. Click on circular. So it was of 1973. So let us select year. If you remember circular number, it is fine. Otherwise, we have to open. It was circular number 122. So let us see this. I hope you can see this font size.
Yes.
I am directed to invite reference, etc., etc. The second point of circular says the board. So board is what? CBDT. The board, in consultation with the Ministry of Law, has re-examined the question of taxability of the salaries paid to the gardeners of the buildings belonging to the employers and occupied by the employees as a perquisite. The board, in consultation with the Ministry of Law, has re-examined the question. There must have been the same issue which came there at that time. So they re-examined the question of taxability of salaries paid to the gardeners belonging to of the building which are belonging to the employers and occupied by the employees as a perquisite. So if you remember section 17 says perquisite includes. So accommodation is a perquisite, and there are so many benefits which are perquisite. Within section 17 clause 2, there is also a point that when employee obligation is met by employer, that is also a perquisite. Any expenditure whose legal obligation falls upon my shoulders as an employee, but my employer has met that expenditure, it becomes a benefit to me. Take an example only of this point. If my children are studying in a school, in any private school, suppose my children are studying. So whose obligation is this to pay the fees of my children? It's my obligation or my employer's obligation? Whose obligation is this?
My
Whose
obligation.
obligation is this? My obligation or employer's obligation?
My obligation, I guess.
That means employee's obligation to pay the fee to the to pay the fee of his or her children in the school. But suppose his or her employer directly pays the fees to that school. Employer directly pays the fees to the school. Whatever fees is paid, it becomes a perquisite for which employee will pay the tax, and that becomes with the name employee obligation met by employer. Have you understood this point? What do I mean by employee's obligation met by employer? Any obligation whose legal obligation, any expenditure whose legal obligation was on me to meet, but my employer has met that obligation, it becomes a benefit to me. That now I'm not supposed to pay that because my employer has paid it. So department says it's a benefit, it's a perquisite, you pay the tax. So I'm giving you a heading of this benefit, employee's obligation met by employer. Have you understood this example of employee obligation met by employer? If yes, please raise the hands. Okay, so this employee's obligation met by employer is written here with a different sentence, you can say, but the intention is same. I told you in a simplified form. The same thing is written here. Employee's obligation met by employer is written in a different context, different sentence, but concept it is same. Section 17 clause 2 clause 4 provides that the term perquisite includes any sum paid by the employer in respect of any obligation which, but for such payment, would have been payable by the assessor. So it is nothing but employee obligation met by employer. So this is how the circular comes. They give the reason also that on what basis they are giving this ruling, this decision. This is what the board has said. Hence, for this definition to apply. Now, which definition is this? Employee obligation met by employer. For this definition to apply, the position must be that if the employer had not laid out the money, what is the meaning of this point? Had employer didn't pay the money, employee himself should have been obliged to do so. It would have been employee's obligation to do so. Now, an individual might not be interested in having a gardener at all. So this is now they are talking in terms of employee. That an individual employee might not be interested in having a gardener. Maybe I don't like garden. And he might allow the garden to run to weed. And he will allow that garden to be just like a vacant land. It depends upon individual's choice. On the other hand, the same circular says he might be an enthusiastic gardener who might himself have laid out large sums on the garden and have employed more gardeners than one. It is also possible that the employee likes the garden so much or has so much attached to greenery that he might himself will employ more than one gardener. So it depends upon individual's perception. A gardener is employed by the employers primarily with a view to maintain the garden, and he renders services whether or not the building is occupied by any employee. This is what the circular says. Why the employer has employed that gardener? Maybe because to maintain the garden. So it does not matter whether anyone occupies that building which is owned by the employer or doesn't occupy the building. Gardener will be employed in view thereof, and therefore it amounts to the maintenance of the house and the grounds which the employer in any case would have done. So even if nobody occupies that building, gardener would have been employed by the employer, irrespective of the fact whether the building was occupied or vacant. As such, and this is the reason, the amount spent on the salary of a gardener by the employer does not represent a sum paid by the employer in respect of any obligation which, but for such payment, would have been payable by the assessee. That is why the circular, by giving this reason, says that whenever building is owned by the employer and if gardener's salary is given, then it is not treated as perquisite in the hands of the employee. The payment of salary to a gardener as such cannot be regarded as a perquisite so as to justify that amount being taxed in the hands of the employees. This is what the circular was. So I simply wanted to show you the original circular, because in future, in your later course of life, you have to refer the original things for each and everything. Ignore the act for everything, even for day-to-day things which are statutory obligations. You have to read the original points. Only then you will say that the decision or the point of the your point of view is correct. Only then when you read the original things which are in the public domain. So now I can say that the value of domestic servant in this case is nil, because in this case accommodation was owned by the employer, and in that case gardener's salary is not taxed separately. If you have understood this point, please raise your hand. So better you note down this point so that you don't forget it in the when after some months you will revise these concepts. So there is a note. salary of gardener is not taxable separately. In the hands of an employee as a perquisite in case the gardener is provided along with the accommodation which is owned by the employer. If you have noted down this point, or the moment you note down this point, please raise your hand. After this, we will start with another perquisite. You raise your hands when you note down this point. You must know the reason. I could have directly told you this point, but it is necessary for you to tell you the reason also from where you will search in future.
So can you please tell the circular number again?
Circular number?
Yes, sir.
It was circular number 122 dated 19th October 1973.
All right, sir. Thank you.
For examination, you are not supposed to learn these things. That's only for your knowledge. Otherwise, for exam purpose, you are not supposed to learn these things. Anyhow, next perquisite now. If you want to note down the circular number, it is 122 dated 19th October 1973. Next perquisite. Household amenities. Perquisite of household amenities. Now, can you tell me what are household amenities? Electricity, providing electricity, water, gas connection, and gas. Any other? So these are main: electricity, water, gas. These are main. These are household amenities. Suppose I get free electricity, free water, free gas as an employee. Government says, Act says it is taxable because it's a perquisite. Had you purchased this or had you paid the bills yourself, you would have paid some amount. So you are saving, so you pay the tax. Now, two things can happen. If I think from employer's point of view, two things can happen. Maybe it is own manufacturing or own production, whatever is that, or maybe purchased from outside. Like water, it is possible that the employer provides filtered mineral water at employee's house. An employer himself has installed a machinery to filter the water. Or it is also possible that this water is purchased directly from big companies who have their own mineral water plants. So both the things can happen. If it is own manufacturing, can you think logically what should be the value which is taxable in the hands of the employee?
So the cost of production.
Yes, so it is manufacturing cost incurred by the employer, it becomes a saving. I will think simply that had employee manufactured it, the same cost employee would have to incur. Now this is my saving. Less amount incurred by the employee. So not incurred, amount recovered from the employee. This is the value which is taxable. If it is purchased from outside, can you think logically what should be the value which is taxable in my hands? Of course, actual expenditure of the employer, whatever payment this employer is giving to any outside agency, that cost minus amount recovered from the employee. This is the value. Let us again discuss an illustration from my book, page number 4.39. Just listen and then tell me the answer. Why? There is an employee Y who has been provided gas facility. PNG connections are now available, of course, at his house by the employer from 4th December 20. The gas bills are paid by the employer to the agency supplying the gas. So this is from outside. This procurement is from outside. The gas bills are paid by the employer to an agency. During 4th December to 31st March 21, the total bills paid for gas amounts to 1400. So gas bill paid by the employer, gas bill paid or payable, okay, rupees 1400. Employee has paid 100 for this gas service to the employer, but Y has given only how much? 100 to the employer for using this service. Can you tell me the value which is taxable in the hands of Y in this case? How much value Y will show?
1300.
1300. It's very simple. Expenditure incurred by the employer, which is 1400, but 100 I am giving back to the employer. So for my purpose, my personal saving will be only 1300. I hope you have understood this point. If yes, please raise the hand. Very good. So let us end the discussion today. So today we have covered two perquisites only. These are very small perquisites, domestic servants and household amenities, but we discussed or we learned the way to read circulars, how the circulars are normally written. And do remember one thing, that these circulars are not legally binding on the assessee. These are binding on the income tax officers. These are binding on the entire department, because in the eyes of the assessee, department is one. Officer may be different. Officer may change the job from one place to another, but in the eyes of the assessee or in the eyes of the outside people, department is one entity. So entire department, and all the people who are working with the department or within the department have to proceed by this circular, so that there is a uniformity within the department. But these are not legally binding. It's my choice as an assessee. I can use this circular, I can apply this circular, or if I think that this circular is in contravention of the provisions of the act or rule, I'm not supposed to follow this circular. It's my choice. Notifications are legally binding on the assessees as well as on the department, because that is having legal backing. Act is of course legally binding, rules are of course legally binding, but circulars are binding on the officers of the department or on the entire department, but not on the assessees. Assessees are not supposed to compulsory apply these circulars. If they want, they can apply, otherwise they can skip. But circulars tells one thing to the assessees, that this is the position of the department on this particular point. Further, every circular will give you some reason that why they are giving this decision, etc., etc. So you can in future read these circulars on your own, not only for this act, but for any act, whichever you will use in future. So that's all from my side. So let us end this session. Goodbye. Tomorrow we will start the perquisite of education facility. That's all from my side for today.